Monday morning here in Beijing. It's 9 a.m. The PM 2.5 blue sky, and it's 11 degree opportunity. So let me take a moment to introduce a few topics that I would like to comment on. First, I understand that I'll be speaking primarily to young men and women who are studying in the U.S., or perhaps some of you in China who are thinking about studying or seeking a career opportunity into the U.S. And I wanted to talk about career and the development of career. First is education, maybe a few comments about choice of education. Some of you have already made that choice. Others perhaps are still considering their education choices. Second, I would like to comment a bit on the choice of career. How to choose a career, what career to choose, of course, is one of the big issues that occupy the minds of most people in their 20s. A third, I would like to comment a bit on the issue of the China bubble. I know a lot of young people from China come to the U.S., and they still primarily spend time with other Chinese students. And they end up working in Chinese organizations and spend a good deal of their time speaking Chinese. And they never really get outside of the China bubble. I'll comment about that briefly. And then finally, a little bit on the importance and value and how-tos of networking. So let me first turn to education. Undergraduates is really a time to explore. It's a time to discover who you are. In English, we like to say it's a time to get to know yourself, or 自我发现, to discover yourself, to discover what direction you want to take in life. I think it's very common for young people, both in the U.S. and in China, when they finished high school, they may be unsure about what direction to take in their. Most American young people, they may, when they're small children, they may look at what their father does, and that will become their career aspiration when they're 7 or 8 years old. But when you graduate from high school, many people, they may have an idea of they like science or humanities, but they may not have a sure idea of a career path. And I think that's very normal. Undergraduate education, I believe, is meant to discover who you really are, to discover your direction in life. It's a process of discovery. Our universities don't require you to immediately declare a major. Most universities, you can wait until your second, third, or even your fourth year to finally declare a major. It's very often that people will change their majors. My youngest son just changed his major. He's in the second year of university now. So that's common. So use your undergraduate as an opportunity to get a broad, general, liberal education. Study many areas, have an opportunity to experience different fields. And on this basis, you can make a more informed judgment and a decision about what career direction you want to take in your life. Also in the U.S., we place great emphasis on what we call 通才教育, or general broad education. And I encourage students to think of their undergraduate as a time to receive a broad liberal education. Now, because our world is becoming more and more complicated, I really recommend that students consider very seriously going on to graduate school after they finish their undergraduate degree. Work towards a master's degree, or even a PhD, or a special professional degree, such as a law degree or perhaps an MBA. I believe that graduate school, that's the time when you can take a deep dive, get deeply into your chosen career path. In English, we differentiate between education on the one hand and training. there's a joke that says you can train a dog, but you can't educate a dog. Now, I think that graduate school is a time for training. That's a time to really get deeply the kind of professional training you need in your career that will prepare you for a career in your chosen field. So undergraduate is a time for broad education and an opportunity to go through the process of selecting your career. And graduate school is a time to deeply get into your career and make those preparations for a career in your chosen field. Now, let me talk a bit about career. I know many young people coming from China, their career choices are strongly influenced by their parents. I think that's quite natural and normal. Perhaps more so in the Chinese students than amongst the career. Some career bar business school, that was the Stanford Graduate School of Business, suggested that when we think about our career choices, choose something that we really love to do. Choose something that makes us happy. He said, think back on your life at some of the times when you felt the happiest, the most excited, the most pumped up. And those will give you a clue. As also think about what you're good at, think about what you love. And then the third thing, think about what's needed in the marketplace. Now, right today, some of the hot areas, some of the 比较热门的专业 are in the high technology or STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics students who grad employment if they're in the STEM or high tech categories. So if that's something that you can do, if you're pretty good at math and science, you will find in this broad science, technology, engineering, mathematics is a huge, broad field. There are a lot of kinds of work on new clean energy. So generally have an easier time finding employment. Also, remember that the OPT. Yes.
A couple people said that it's a little I was wondering maybe we should go ahead and stop the video.
Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of the people said it's cutting out a little bit. Do you want to just go ahead and stop the video and then we'll just continue with voice? Maybe that will help a little bit.
Okay.
All you do in the left-hand bottom corner, there's a stop video button. If you click on that, yeah, there you go.
We're there.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think this may help. You don't need to watch me after you've seen the first 10
Actually, Steve, why don't we try this? Why don't you leave the meeting and come back in? It's still pretty cutting.
So, let me go back to
hey, Steve.
The OPT. Well, let me try this here.
Hey, Steve, why don't you leave the meeting and come back because it's still cutting out quite a bit. Maybe that'll help catch up a little bit.
Okay, I just closed down my VPN. Is that any better?
Oh.
Or is it about?
For now, it's not cutting out at all. It sounds okay to me.
Well, let me try this. I had my VPN turned on.
Sure.
And that knocked things down.
Yeah, that might help actually. For now, it's not cutting out at all. You might even be able to turn your video back on if you want.
I'm just using the hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, this sounds good. With your VPN turned off, it seems to be good.
Okay, well, let me continue then. I was talking about choice of career, and recommending choosing something that you love to do, something that you're good at, and think about something that the market really needs. And right now, the market really needs people with technology, that in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those are clearly the areas with greater demand. I told my own children, if you want to find opportunities in life, be willing to do things that other people don't want to do. And a lot of American students, they're turning away from the high-tech fields because they might think it's too hard. So what other students avoid, those may be areas that are opportunities for you. Now, regarding career, another choice is between big companies or small companies, or even starting your own business. A lot of young people find that if they can first get work in a large, well-known company initially, it may be easier for them to become known and to develop skills. Most of us find that our real learning about our careers starts after we finish college. I remember years ago when I first finished university, finished the business school, I worked for the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. And that's when my real education started, was working in real business in real life. So getting a job in a larger company often is a great opportunity to get training. At the same time, it may be difficult. There are thousands of smaller startup companies that may also be great opportunities. In a small company, you probably will have broader responsibility for more different business functions. Then, of course, a lot of people decide to start their own business. Many of us prefer to get work first in a company, in an organization, and then later on try to go out on our own to start a business. But let me shift gears for a moment to this question of a friend of mine referred to it as the China bubble. That is, we find that in universities in the U.S., Chinese students have a tendency to hang out and spend time with other Chinese students. Most of their social life is with other Chinese students. Many of them, other than participating in class or listening to lectures, end up spending most of their social time with Chinese students and speaking Chinese. As a result, that inhibits or slows down their ability to be assimilated, 就是能够融入我们美国文化, to get assimilated into U.S. culture and U.S. society. Many people, after they graduate, they end up working in a Chinese organization or an organization, a company that's related to China or doing work in China. The same young friend I mentioned, he graduated from USC in Los Angeles. He actually emigrated to the United States, had a green card, was there from the 8th grade, but because of where he lived, I believe it was in Arcadia, many of his young friends were other Chinese students. He went to USC, hung out primarily with other Chinese students, and then got a job in an Asian bank, a Chinese bank in the US. So an issue is it a good thing? Is it a problem to have your career, to launch and stay inside this so-called China bubble? I think there are both advantages and disadvantages. There are pros and cons. Some of the advantages are working in this U.S. Chinese overlap, this international arena is a natural fit. If you're from China, you speak Chinese, you understand a lot about the Chinese economy and Chinese society, it makes this certain amount of sense to work in that so-called China bubble. Also, good news is opportunities in that area are going to be growing more and more. For the past 30 years, the primary flow of investment and business transactions were foreign companies investing in the US, in China, American companies going to China and establishing joint ventures. Now we see more and more Chinese companies coming into the US. Those companies will need people like yourselves who have the language, who understand English, who understand the English culture, the American culture. And if you're working for a Chinese firm in the US, the more you are able to enter into the US culture, the more value you have to a Chinese company. So there are lots of opportunities, both in the US and back here in China, where I am right now, to continue to work in this international space, this China bubble. Opportunities are both here in China and in the US. For example, the US movie or film industry is becoming more and more excited about producing movies here in China with Chinese actors and Chinese directors to create movies that can appeal both to a Chinese and a international and American audience. Almost every industry you can think of, there will be opportunities for the US-China overlap, the area where both cultures, both countries are participating. On the other hand, remaining in that China bubble limits your opportunities. It limits the scope of where you might end up working and what kind of work you might be able to do, what kind of a role or position you might have working in a foreign company. The same young person I mentioned who started his career in the China bubble was actually working in New York, worked in New York City, and had an opportunity to transfer to a job at Columbia University. And at that point, he said he finally got out of the China bubble. So if you can get out of the China bubble, you will find broader opportunities, geographically broader, a broader set of potential employer companies, and so on. So how do you get out of the China bubble if you want to? Well, the three most important skills to develop are English, English, and English. Language is really the foundation of culture, and that to really be able to get outside the China bubble, the most important thing is to really develop English. We know that a good way to test someone's understanding of a foreign language is can they understand the jokes? Like, I've been in China for 30 years and I still don't get the jokes. Sometimes we watch television and my Chinese friends, they're laughing. I don't understand what they're laughing about, because humor, getting the jokes, is really a cultural skill more than language itself. So make it your objective, your goal, to be able to understand the jokes. How do you do that? How do you reduce your accent so that Americans find it easier to talk to you and make you more understandable? How do you expand your vocabulary? Well, networking, hanging out with Americans. You don't learn English just by reading books and listening to teachers. It comes, of course, by hanging out with other Americans. How many of you have American roommates? How many of you socialize with Americans? One way to get outside your own bubble is to join clubs and activities and church groups, associations. Attend events. There are dozens of events. For example, in the Los Angeles area, there are probably over 100 different public events that one could go to. Attend more events. meet people, travel, get outside of the Los Angeles bubble if that's where you are, and explore more of the U.S. Read as much as you can. Read English novels, read comic books, read the newspapers, watch more movies. All of these things will help you strengthen English and give you the language and cultural ability to get outside the China bubble. And to a future potential Chinese employer, you will have even more value if you can associate freely and easily with American executives and business people and your peers. So those are the four main topics I wanted to touch on quickly. Is education. To summarize, your undergraduate is a time to explore, to choose your major, to choose your career, and it's a time for a broad general education. Graduate school is a time to really deepen your training in your chosen career. At that time, you can choose a graduate school that is best for your career. Choose a career, something you love to do, something that you're really good at, but also consider what's needed in the marketplace. Right now in the U.S., the high-tech STEM careers are the ones that have the greatest demand. Third point is consider whether or not you want to stay in or get out of the China bubble that so many students find themselves in. There are advantages. There are many opportunities in the China bubble, and they are growing with Chinese companies more and more coming into the U.S. And then finally, how to get out of the China bubble if that's what you really want to do. The real focus should be on English and English and networking. So with that, let me stop and see if there might be some questions and turn it back over to Angela.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. So yeah, let's go ahead and open the floor to everyone who's here. If you have any questions, just type into the chat box. And by the way, can everyone hear me? Okay. Go ahead and type your questions in the chat box, and then we will, I'll read them to Steve. So, do we have any questions from anybody? Everyone's still typing one to say, yes, I can hear you. So yeah, keep in mind, Steve has been working in China for many, many years, and he often gives, I have Steve's contact information. Actually, that's one of my good friends that wants your contact information. We'll have to talk about that later. But yeah, so you could feel free to ask Steve about anything related to the Chinese U.S. Business sphere. Ask about, education. He's very well versed in everything China and U.S. related, and he consults with students very often. Also works with immigration. So I know. Ask him a question that he can tell everyone an answer to, Ruby.
By the way, I will be in Los Angeles, I believe on May 10th. We have a seminar, don't we, Angela? With the
the
partnership, economic development partnership in San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah, talking about, I forget the name of the panel, but something about China U.S. economics or something like that. So it looks like a really good event. Judy Chu is going to be there, I think, quite a few other big names in California. If nobody else is going to ask a question, I guess I'll ask them questions then. I know a lot of people, like even yesterday, we were talking to some people about what to do when they move to Los Angeles and what's the best way to make friends and interact. And there was a 14-year-old girl who had just moved here. She's been here for a couple months, and she was a little bit She's living in Corona, which is not Chinese. It's not Chinatown. Her mom specifically moved there to stay out of the Chinese bubble, and so she mentioned that most of her friends are other international students. They're not Chinese students, but her friends are, Vietnamese students or other international students who can understand the English problems. So she was looking for some advice for how to make better friends. But actually, before we get to that, let's talk about some other people's questions. We now have some questions coming in. So Ruby wants to know, what do you think of startups?
Well, startups can be exciting. Generally, there's much higher risk involved. There's business risk. Most startups, the people working in startups have to do a lot of different jobs. You have a small number of people. It's a learning experience for everyone. Usually the environment is quite, we could say, chaotic. 有一点混乱, the environment, because for many of the people in the startup, they're doing things for the first time. There are not a lot of set procedures, but it can be very exciting, very rewarding, usually very long hours. And if you have an equity position and if it's successful, you can really make a lot of money in startups. So the trick for a startup generally is two key things: having a really great market idea, that is an idea for something the world really needs, and number two, financial backing. So if you're interested in startups in general, think about getting to know a lot of people in the venture capital community, the VCs, the angel investors, and so on. If you're in Silicon Valley, they have an ecosystem in Silicon Valley that's a combination of venture capital, high tech, attorneys, and so on. But
Okay.
startups can be fun.
Awesome. We have another question is, how did you learn about Chinese culture? And I think they want to learn from how you learned more about Chinese culture so they can use that same method for learning English better.
Well, so how did I learn about Chinese culture? Well, when I was 19 years old, I went to Taiwan and I spent 30 months in Taiwan. That was after my first year in university. And I spent 2.5 years there. I was a volunteer sent by my church group. And I spent that time mostly talking to local Chinese people in Taiwan, and I learned Chinese. Then I went back to school and completed my undergraduate education, where at that point, I changed my major to international relations, and I took a minor in Chinese history. There at Harvard, going to MIT, we could also take courses at Harvard. So I studied some history of China. I lived here and I took Chinese courses, and then I graduated and for 10 years did nothing with China. Back in then 10 years later, about 1980s, early 80s, I came to China with a U.S. joint venture, a U.S. company that wanted to establish a joint venture. And I played the China bubble card. That is, I worked in the China bubble using my Chinese background to help an American company come into the Chinese market. So many of you go to the US, you develop language, you study English, and then there's a Chinese company wanting to go into the US market. You find a job with them. That's exactly what I did, only in reverse. And then I had found other opportunities working in China. And now it's been 35 years since I first came to China.
Yeah, that's a really long time. Still super jealous of all the things you got to see that I can just see video of. We have another really good question, and that is, what would be a preferable way to spend a gap year between undergrad and graduate school?
That's a great idea. A great question, that is. And there are two or three totally different approaches to a gap year. One, some people want to get some real world experience working in some kind of a company or working doing something that will give them a better idea about what final career they should choose. For example, if one wants to go to business school, nowadays most of the MBA schools require students to have 2 or 3 years work experience. That's one direction then, is to get a little career experience. Another totally different direction, which I think is a very useful one, is to try something totally different. You might join a volunteer organization. Angela, what's the group that builds housing? It's a volunteer group.
Habitat for Humanity.
Habitat for Humanity. You join something that's a volunteer organization. You might, or there may be international groups where you can travel overseas and you participate in some kind of a service capacity. You might go to a developing country in Africa. You could go to some other culture, society, and spend a year doing something where you're really getting outside of your traditional background, exploring the world, doing something of service that's helpful, where you can learn things that you will never learn in university. A third direction could be to simply travel. If you have the means to do it, to travel, travel as not as a tourist, but as a traveler. You know, go low and slow, meet the people, get involved in the cultures. You could even profitably spend a year traveling all around the United States to learn the United States outside of Los Angeles. So travel, some kind of a service organization where you can get involved in typically developing country or some sort of social service. There are many, many volunteer organizations that will give you life experience you cannot find in school.
That's true. We have another question, and that is, what do you think about the economy of China right now? Do you think it's good or not so good?
Well, based on my experience, I don't see any real major problems. As I talk to people and listen to people and travel around China, it seems to me, at least on the surface, that the economy seems to be doing quite well. I know there's a lot of discussion. There's some concern that there might be a real estate bubble. Real estate prices in some of the leading cities have gone up, in many cases, too fast, primarily because individuals are buying real estate as a form of investment. As you know, people will buy a condo, buy an apartment here in China, in especially the top cities, with no intention of ever living in it. They buy it as a form of investment because they believe the prices will continue to go up. If the demand is solely, primarily from this investment perspective, at some point, the prices may no longer go up, and then there will create a panic and people will suddenly sell. That topic, you hear concern about a potential property bubble. But other than that, the rest of the economy, the real economy, seems to be continuing to grow. The government is constantly using their both fiscal and financial policies to try to manage the economy to continue the growth rate. I think the number of new graduates each year is so large here that it is still difficult for many of the young people to find employment, to find a job right away. But I guess I would defer to some of the economists who study the economy explicitly. But my own sense is the economy seems to be doing quite well. The renminbi most recently has started to strengthen a bit, one concern is the capital flight, the amount of renminbi that had been exchanged for U.S. dollars to invest overseas was huge. I think last year there was almost $1 trillion U.S. dollars that was seeking investment outside of China. And one of the most visible policies of recent months has been a restriction on the amount of foreign currency that could be sent abroad for investment, especially for investment in real estate. Companies wanting to do mergers and acquisitions overseas, evidently that does not seem to be a problem, but individuals wanting to invest primarily in real estate for the purpose of diversifying their assets, there has been more and more restriction. We'll have to wait and see if the government wants to relax controls on foreign exchange in the second half of the year.
Okay. Since you mentioned investments, another question was, Sheen wanted to know any thoughts you had on Chinese investments, specifically for Chinese wealth management.
Well, if we're talking about investments in China, no, I would have to say no. I don't really have a good handle. I think people still tend to put their money into real estate. The stock market is not well regulated. It's more like gambling, is my opinion, on the Chinese stock market. Investing overseas, if they can overcome the currency exchange restrictions, most Chinese are still finding they're comfortable investing in real estate in the United States. To invest in a business, to invest in the stock market, you really have two choices. Either you have to learn to become an active investor and really know the market, or there are many wealth management organizations in the U.S. that manage, for example, mutual funds. A lot of people will trust money to mutual fund managers. If you go in that direction, my recommendation is study the market, find out which funds have a strong long-term track record, diversify investment into several different funds if you want to go into the equity markets. If not, maybe I stick with real estate seems to be the safest long-term bet.
Cool. We have a very interesting question from Yi Lun Hao, and the question is kind of abstract. How do you make good decisions? Would you say that the doctrine of follow your heart is reasonable?
I think it is reasonable in many cases. For one thing, when you say follow your heart, I think that really means what your instinct and what you think you want to do. Generally, your heart will tell you things that you really love to do. And my experience is that people generally love to do things they're good at. They're drawn to things where they feel comfortable, to things which they probably will succeed at. And if you love to do something, you probably will do well at it. It may require that you redefine success. Success, I think, means achieving an objective. If you simply define success as making a lot of money or being the richest guy in your class or making your mother happy, it may not work. But if success is defined as meeting your own objectives, then following your heart, it could be good advice. But you also have to be pragmatic about where your heart is leading you. If your heart is leading you to do something that has little prospect of, for example, making much money to earn your way in life, you must be prepared for the consequences of your choices. You can choose your direction, but you can't always choose the consequence of your direction. So I think to balance leading with your heart, you have to ask, what are the consequences of this choice? And do I love the consequences as much as I love the choice? And if you don't, then your heart maybe is being sort of short-sighted. So I think at the end of the day, there has to be a balance. And generally, take some time. Your heart may be telling you one thing today and another thing tomorrow. So sometimes you need to take some time, be patient with yourself to see if a direction that your heart is leading you is something that seems to be a long-term, constant direction. If it is, that's probably a pretty good sign.
Okay. So another question we have is, do you give some suggestions for finding the right career path? But we also have a request for you to answer a question in Chinese. So maybe that would be a good one. Career advice, but answered in Chinese.
Okay, about 就关于选择专业的话，我刚刚说的主要的核心概念是，首先要选择你真的自己比较喜欢做的，你最爱做的、热爱做某一件事儿，可能是你的首选，你的最好的选择。反正你爱做某一件事，就是意味着你比较善于这个事，能够做的 you're good at it， 能做的比较不错。那么是第一。第二呢，要看市场的需求。目前美国市场而言，现在的比较热门的专业，我上这个互联网看美国最热门的10个专业，其中9个都是什么什么工程，都是搞科技的。所以现在比较热门是搞科技的。还有一点是看哪些专业需要你进一步能够融入美国文化这个社会。您比如说呢，有的搞科技的这种岗位、这种专业，也对英语的要求并不高，主要的是做这个研发做科研它的语言可能是数学或是其他的，就是比较科技的专用词。那么相对而言，还有其他的方向。您比如说 marketing 市场市场方面的话，这个可能需要你进一步跟一般的美国老百姓沟通，就对你的英语的这个能力，这个文化的融入程度和能力的要求更高。所以看第一是不同的专业、不同的这个岗位、不同的功能，需要不同的这个英语和文化的融入程度。所以因为很多的外国的，尤其是来自印度和中国的学生，他们为什么比较倾向于搞科技的话，是因为在这个领域的话，英语的这个作为障碍不是特别重要。而且这个领域就是搞科技领域，很多的美国孩子也不太想做。所以因为这个原因，更多的是走上那个搞科技方向就可以吗？ Did I pass？ 能听懂吗？
我觉得大家能听懂。Yeah, they said yeah. And one, which means yes. 错 Steven's Chinese is so awesome. Oh, yeah. Ruby says, 你的中文太棒了。
谢谢 Ruby 了。
Do we have any other questions for Steve before we let him get back to his day in Beijing? 还有一些问题吗? And while you're thinking about your questions, oh, somebody's sending me a question in Chinese, and my Chinese reading is so bad. 要不要再把那个问题给大家看，然后有一个人可以说 English 就比较好一点，因为我看汉字非常慢。Oh, okay. Probably that should be okay. So before we get out of here, okay, now that you've spoken in Chinese, now everybody's typing in Chinese. Oh, you guys are making me so nervous. Anyway, I was gonna, if you guys, if you guys would like, I have a document that has some advice for job seekers. It's basically a list of advice for before you do an interview as an international student. So this information is mostly for someone who is interviewing with English as their second language. So if you would be interested in that document, please type your email. You can send your email to me privately if you don't want to send it to everyone. But send me your email address and then I will send you that document. And if you guys have any questions for Steve or any questions for me, you can send an email to info@hgplus.com. I'm going to type that in the chat box really quick. 如果你要问 Steve 一些什么问题或者问我，也可以 send a message to info@hgplus.com. And let me think, is there anything else I want to tell you? Oh, thank you for adding your emails, guys. Yeah, you can send us questions about jobs. You can send us questions about, the job market in the U.S. You can, Steve also works with immigration. So if you guys have any questions about immigration to the U.S., you can also send those questions. I'm sure Steve would be happy to answer those as well. And before we leave, are there any more questions? According to your personal experience, how to distinguish bad discomfort and good discomfort?
Well, by good discomfort, I'm not sure what you mean, but I assume you mean sometimes you might feel pressure and you might feel nervous about performing. That's a type of discomfort. If you're going to an interview, you might feel nervous. I guess that's normal. You might feel anxious. You might feel some discomfort. Other type of discomfort, I think, is regret. That you wish you had done something that you didn't do. And regret, you may think, I wish I had chosen a different career. Or you're thinking that a previous choice was a bad choice. That's a different kind of discomfort. So, although I'm not sure what you meant, it seems like a good discomfort is when you feel anxious or nervous about doing something that will challenge you. A kind of bad discomfort is maybe when you feel regret for something you wish you had done, but you can't change that. So to get over bad discomfort, maybe it's a matter of forgiving yourself, making better choices next time, and moving on. I don't know if that's helpful.
Hopefully it is. And we have any more questions? People are asking if Steve can give more webinars. Yes, a lot of people are very impressed with your webinar and they want to know if you'll be doing any more webinars in the future.
Well, I would love to do more webinars if I can do something that would be helpful. So
sure.
I'm back on to say hello.
Oh, good. And since Steve mentioned that, maybe it would be a good idea for you guys, you can send it in an email later if you would like. Send us suggestions on the topics you would like us to do webinars about. So if you have a specific topic or some specific questions that you would like answered, please, let us know, and then we can cater the webinar to that topic for you.
Sounds like a great plan.
All right. Well, I think it's about time for us to get out of here. If you didn't send me your email address yet, please go ahead and do that so that we can let you know when the webinar is going to come up next time we invite Steve. Yes, I'll put my email on here as well. You guys can send any questions to this email address, and I can get any information to Steve through that email address. Just mention the webinar that you were on a webinar with Steve Hendryx, and we will know what you're talking about. Don't worry. Okay, well, Steve, thank you so much for coming, Steve. Everybody, thank you for participating.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.